Hey, deep divers, ready for another deep dive? This time you've sent us into the world of AWS security, and wow, you weren't kidding around with this stack of sources.
That's a lot to unpack.
It really is. We're talking firewalls, AI going rogue, Amazon detective, guard duty. It's the whole security alphabet soup here. But that's why you have us, right?
Absolutely. And this stuff is fascinating.
It is. You know, when I first saw this stack of technical deep dives and product update videos, straight from AWS themselves, by the way.
You can tell they take this seriously.
Oh, for sure. But I have to admit, I did wonder for a second if we were going to need, like, a secret decoder ring to get through it all. Luckily, that's where your expertise comes in.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
And trust me, no decoder ring needed, though it would be cool. But seriously, after going through all of this, what's really standing out to me is how different cloud security is from, your grandma's IT security setup.
Totally. One thing that struck me was how AWS isn't just about building tougher walls. It's almost like they're expecting those walls to be tested, Like, how could someone climb over this tunnel under it, even trick the system into lowering the walls itself?
Exactly. And that's where it gets really interesting with AI coming into play, both as a defender and, get this, potentially a target.
Yeah.
You've got services like Amazon Detective that use AI to make sense of threats. It's like getting a clear story instead of a jumble of alerts, which is amazing. But then some of these sources you sent, they also highlight how AI itself could be vulnerable.
Wait, hold on. Vulnerable how? Are we talking about someone hijacking my AI models here? Because that sounds a bit too much like a sci-fi thriller to me.
It's more realistic than you might think. Imagine someone subtly messing with the data used to train your AI. Suddenly, your AI is making decisions based on bad information, and you might not even realize it. That's where guard duty comes in, keeping an eye on things, especially with services like Bedrock and SageMaker.
So it's like having a security system that not only watches for break-ins, but also makes sure no one's messing with the security system's programming itself.
Precisely. Guard duty can see things like strange logins to Bedrock, attempts to bypass safety measures in AI, even unusual API calls to SageMaker. It's all about looking for anything out of the ordinary, even within the AI.
So for our deep divers out there who are navigating AWS security, what's the big takeaway here?
Think layers.
Yeah.
Just like you wouldn't have a single lock on your front door.
Yeah.
You'd have deadbolts, maybe an alarm system, even those neighbors who always seem to be peeking out the window.
And let's not forget a good guard dog.
Exactly. It's the same idea here. AWS gives you tools for every layer of security. You've got your basic perimeter protection with Network Firewall, which is like your front door lock, controlling who and what can even get close to your cloud resources.
You're controlling the traffic coming in, making sure it's legitimate. But you said layers, so what's next?
Right, so then it gets even deeper. AWS has tools that analyze behaviors, looking for those subtle clues that something fishy might be going on. And it also gives you ways to actively search for threats. You're not just reacting, you're going on the offensive too.
So it's not just about reactive security, but being proactive, kind of like a good security guard would be. Instead of just waiting for something to happen, they're always on the lookout, right?
You got it.
Yep.
Take, for instance, customizing security posture monitoring in Security Hub. One of your sources went deep on this. It's not enough to just have some basic security settings flipped on. You've got to fine-tune them.
It's about knowing your organization's risk tolerance, what you're willing to accept, and what you absolutely can't afford to have happen.
Exactly. And this reminds me of another source you sent about retrieving sensitive data samples with Amazon Macy.
Ah, Macy. It's like having a bloodhound sniffing out all your sensitive data.
And with that retrieval feature, it's like having the bloodhound bring you the evidence, too. You need to see what happened, right?
Right. That way, if something does go wrong, you can figure out what it was, how it happened, and how to prevent it in the future.
Yeah.
So much better than just knowing something went wrong, but having no clue what. So we've got AI playing both sides, the need for layers of security, and being proactive. It's a lot to think about.
That's just the tip of the iceberg we haven't even touched on. It's a wild ride for sure. Speaking of which, one of the sources you sent really dove into AWS WAF, the web application firewall.
Right, WF. It's like that extra layer of security specifically for your web apps. So what makes it so special? It seems like there's a lot there.
It's all about getting super specific with your security rules.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it this way. You're not just blocking traffic based on where it's coming from anymore. You can set up rules based on all sorts of things. Where the request originated, what path it's taking within your website.
Okay, so I could block requests that are coming from, say, a specific country or even a specific state. That seems incredibly precise.
You got it. That's how granular you can get. And then there are those text transformations they added to WAF. Things like decoding base64 encoded text and hashing algorithms. Sounds complicated, but it's like having a secret weapon against those sneaky attacks that try to blend in.
Okay, I kind of get it. So it's like having a security guard who's not just checking IDs, but they can also spot a fake ID from a mile away, even if it looks really convincing at first glance.
You got it. And it's not just about blocking individual bad actors. WAF can also protect against those massive DDoS attacks you hear about, the ones that can cripple entire websites.
DDoS, distributed denial of service. Those attacks sound terrifying, like a digital swarm of locusts descending on your website. How does WAF even begin to handle something like that?
Imagine a tidal wave of requests all hitting your website at once, trying to overload your servers. WAF steps in as a shield, spotting those malicious patterns like a sudden flood from a single IP address. By blocking that bad traffic, WAF stops it from ever reaching your servers in the first place.
So it's like a very, very strong bouncer at a club who can spot troublemakers before they even get through the door, keeping the party going and everyone safe inside. That's a great analogy.
I like it. And when you pair WAF with AWS Shield, which protects your infrastructure from similar attacks, you've basically got a fortress around your digital assets.
Speaking of Shield, one of our deep divers sent a source about Shield Advanced. What is that all about?
So Shield Advanced is like having an elite security detail, but for your most critical AWS resources. And here's the really cool part. It comes with these things called mitigation metrics, which are like real-time reports from your security detail.
Oh, so you can see exactly what's happening, how Shield is defending you, and what those attacks look like. That's super helpful information to have. It's like having security camera footage. Even if nothing gets stolen, you can see what they were after, how they tried to get in.
You got it. And speaking of control, let's talk about Amazon Cognito for a second.
Cognito, right. That's your user authentication service. Help me out here. What does that mean again?
It's how you manage users logging in and accessing your applications. And one of the sources you sent mentioned this new access token customization feature, which is a game changer, especially for developers.
Okay, so instead of just handing over a key to the house, you're giving them a key that only unlocks certain doors.
You got it. This means developers can decide which resources each user can touch and what they can do with them, all through the access token.
Ah, so it's all about giving developers more control over who can access what.
Exactly. And speaking of control, remember when we talked about Security Hub?
Right. And how important it is to customize those security settings, not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Right. And AWS knows that,
Yeah.
which is why they actually give you recommendations on how to set things up. It's like having a security consultant built right into the platform.
That's super helpful, especially for someone just starting out, or maybe they don't have a dedicated security team yet. Even if you do have a team, that little extra guidance is never a bad thing, especially from the experts.
I agree. And speaking of learning from the experts, you sent in something about the AWS Cloud Audit Academy. It's this free online program they offer.
That sounds super valuable. Is it just for security professionals, or can anyone take it?
It's designed to help anyone involved in managing security and compliance. It covers auditing, risk management. It's like a crash course in staying compliant and secure in the cloud.
It's amazing how much AWS prioritizes giving users the tools and knowledge they need, not just throwing them in the deep end and hoping for the best.
They definitely believe in empowering their users. But, it highlights something really important. Security is a two-way street.
Oh, absolutely. It's a shared responsibility. AWS gives you the tools and the guidance, but it's ultimately up to you to implement it and make sure you're doing your part to stay safe.
Exactly. Think of it like AWS gives you a state-of-the-art security system for your house, but you're still responsible for arming it, locking the doors, and maybe not posting vacation photos on social media while you're away.
Right. Don't forget common sense. So it's a partnership. And speaking of partnerships, we can't forget about our internet-connected devices. You actually sent in some stuff about AWS IoT Core, the service that lets devices talk to the cloud. Does this mean my smart toaster needs a bodyguard now?
Pretty much. We live in a world where everything is connected, so everything needs some level of security. One of your sources actually talked about how AWS bakes security directly into IoT Core.
Okay, so what does that even look like, securing a smart toaster?
Well, for starters, they use this thing called OCSP stapling. Basically, it's like checking a device's ID card before letting it into the party.
Okay, so it's like that digital ID card that websites use. What are they called?
SSL certificates.
Yes, SSL certificates. So IoT devices have something similar.
Precisely. Just like those certificates prove a website is legitimate, IoT devices use digital certificates to prove their identity. OCSP stapling just streamlines that whole process, making sure only authorized devices can connect to your cloud.
Ah, so it's like a security guard at the door of your network checking everyone's ID before they're allowed in. That makes a lot of sense. And it prevents those awkward, I forgot my ID at home moments for your devices.
Exactly. And by handling this whole ID check themselves, AWS makes the connection process faster and more private for your devices, which is a win-win.
We've gone from AI and firewalls to securing toasters. This deep dive is really proving that AWS security is a wild ride. What else do you have for me?
Hold on tight, because we're about to dive into the world of vulnerability management with Amazon Inspector.
Sounds exciting. Amazon Inspector, that's like your vulnerability scanner, right?
Yep.
It's constantly on the lookout for any weaknesses in your systems.
You got it. One of your sources mentioned this new feature in Amazon Inspector that blew my mind. CIS benchmark assessments for EC2 instances.
Okay, now you're just using acronyms I don't understand. Break it down for me. What does all that even mean?
You know how there's a right way to do pretty much everything? CIS benchmarks are like the right way to set up and secure your systems.
They're the industry standard, the gold standard. Everyone looks to them for best practices. So Amazon Inspector is now comparing our EC2 instances to this gold standard, essentially giving us a report card on our security posture.
Think of it like an automated security audit, always running in the background to make sure your configurations are up to par. And if something's not quite right, Inspector will flag it and give you recommendations on how to fix it.
So it's not just pointing out the problems, it's also giving you the solutions.
Precisely. And when you're dealing with a lot of EC2 instances, that level of automation is priceless. It saves you time, reduces the chance of human error. It's a total game changer.
It's like having a team of security experts constantly monitoring your systems 24/7, and they're always coming up with ways to make things even better. Talk about peace of mind. So we've got automated security checks, but what about knowing what data you have and where it is? That seems like a huge part of security too, right?
100%. And that's where Amazon Macy steps in. You send in some stuff about their new feature, Reveal Samples. And let me tell you, this is a game changer. Imagine this. Macy finds something potentially risky with your sensitive data, but instead of just giving you a cryptic warning, it shows you a sample of the data it's concerned about.
Whoa, so you can see the actual data firsthand? That's huge. Being able to see it, not just get a vague warning, gives you so much more control.
Absolutely. You can immediately see what Macy is flagging, understand the context, and make informed decisions about how to protect it. It's like having X-ray vision for your data security.
Okay, I am loving this Reveal Samples feature. So we've got tools that act like security guards, personal assistants, even detectives, and now X-ray vision. AWS security is sounding less like a boring necessity and more like a superhero team-up.
I like the way you think. But you're right. AWS provides so many different tools, it could be hard to keep track.
It really can, especially when you think about managing security across multiple AWS accounts. It's like herding cats, but instead of cats, it's firewalls and security groups and access keys.
Herding digital cats, each with its own security needs. And speaking of which, one of your sources talked about AWS Firewall Manager. It's designed to simplify security management across those multiple accounts.
Right. It's like having one central command center for all your firewall rules, which is such a relief because trying to manage those across multiple accounts sounds like a recipe for disaster, or at least a very overwhelmed security team.
And one of the sources highlighted this new Firewall Manager feature. It helps you audit your security group rules for unrestricted access, which is crucial.
So what's the big deal with unrestricted access? It sounds pretty self-explanatory. You don't want anything wide open?
You'd be surprised how often these things slip through the cracks, even for seasoned pros. Unrestricted access, whether it's inbound or outbound traffic, can be a major security risk.
Think of it like leaving your front door wide open. Anyone could just walk in. Okay, that's a terrifying thought.
Right. So this new feature is like having someone check all your doors and windows, making sure nothing's left accidentally unlocked. It's all about proactively closing those security gaps.
I am all about proactively closing security gaps. So we've got our security guards, our personal assistants, our detectives, our X-ray vision, and now our security sweep team making sure we didn't leave any doors open. AWS is really pulling out all the stops here.
They really are. But it's not just about having all the latest gadgets and gizmos. It's about understanding the core principles.
Like what?
Like the principle of least privilege, which basically means only giving users access to the bare minimum they need to do their jobs. That's where IAM Identity Center comes in. It's like giving each person a key card that only unlocks the doors they're allowed to go through.
Right. And no wandering the halls. One of the sources mentioned a new feature in IAM Identity Center that makes this whole process even more secure. It enables multi-factor authentication by default for new instances.
Now that's a security win right there. MFA is like having a second lock on your door. It makes it that much harder for anyone to get in without permission. So instead of just relying on a password, which everyone knows is about as secure as a screen door on a submarine these days, you're adding another layer of verification.
Exactly. It's a simple change that makes a world of difference. And by making it the default, AWS is ensuring that organizations are starting off on the right foot, security-wise.
So we've locked down our users, we're managing firewalls like pros. What's next on our AWS security checklist?
I'm glad you asked, because we need to talk about securing the traffic flowing in and out of your AWS environment, which is where AWS Network Firewall comes in.
Right. Network Firewall, it's like having a border patrol for your cloud, making sure only authorized traffic gets through.
And one of your sources highlighted a really cool new feature that takes this to the next level. Network Firewall can now decrypt, inspect, and re-encrypt TLS traffic leaving your VPC. Okay, I have to stop you right there. Decrypting traffic. As in seeing inside the messages that are supposed to be secret. Doesn't that seem a bit, well, invasive?
I know it sounds a little Big Brother-ish, but hear me out. Previously, this type of encrypted traffic was like a sealed envelope. You couldn't see what was inside without the key. This new capability lets you carefully open that envelope, check for anything dangerous, and then reseal it before sending it on its way.
So it's more like a customs inspection. You're not reading every single word. You're just making sure there's nothing harmful or illegal being smuggled through.
Exactly. This means security teams can now look for things like malware, attempts to steal data, even violations of compliance rules, all without compromising the privacy of the actual data.
Wow. So it's like having X-ray vision for your network traffic, but with privacy in mind. This deep dive has really shown me how multi-layered AWS security really is.
And we've only just scratched the surface. But with all these different tools and services, things can start to feel a bit overwhelming. It's a lot to manage, even for the pros.
Right. It's like having all the pieces of a giant jigsaw puzzle, but no picture on the box to guide you. That's where, if I remember correctly, Security Lake comes in, right?
You got it. Security Lake is like that puzzle box. It pulls in all your security data, all those logs and alerts, but it doesn't stop there. One of your sources explained how Security Lake actually organizes all that information using something called the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework. Catchy name, right?
OSCF. That's a mouthful. I'm going to need a little more explanation on that one. What exactly does it do?
Think of it like this. You have a bunch of different security tools, each with its own language and way of reporting things. OSCF is like a universal translator, making sure everyone can understand each other.
So instead of Security Lake being a jumbled mess of data, it's organized, standardized, and easy to make sense of. It's like having a multilingual security team that all speaks the same language. Much less room for miscommunication.
Exactly. And to make things even better, Security Lake uses this thing called the Apache Parquet format. It's a way of compressing the data, which means you can store more information without needing a server farm the size of a small country.
Okay, so we're not just talking organization, we're talking efficiency too. It's like having a library that can store millions of books, but still helps you find the exact book you're looking for in seconds.
You're getting good at this. And just like that library, Security Lake plays well with other AWS services, like Amazon Athena, which lets you search through your data using simple commands, and Amazon SageMaker, which is like having a team of data scientists at your beck and call. It's not just about collecting data. It's about making that data work for you.
Turning all that data into actionable insights. So instead of just reacting to things after they happen, you can start to spot patterns, predict potential problems, and get ahead of the game. I like the sound of that.
Me too. And this brings us to another critical aspect of security that's often overlooked: incident response planning.
Oh, right. The what-if plan, even though nobody likes to think about the what-ifs.
Nobody likes to think about them, but they happen. No matter how secure your systems are, there's always a chance that something could go wrong. And when it does, you need to be ready.
It's like having a fire drill. You hope you never have to use it, but you'll be thankful you practiced if a fire does break out. So with security, it's all about having a plan, knowing who does what, and making sure everyone is on the same page.
Exactly. And just like a fire drill, your incident response plan should be tested and updated regularly. You need to make sure everyone knows their role, the tools you have in place are effective, and that the plan itself still makes sense.
This deep dive is reminding me that security is a lot like staying in shape. You can't just go to the gym once and expect to be ripped. It takes constant effort, vigilance, and a willingness to adapt as needed.
100%. Speaking of which, one of your sources brought up something really important: security training and awareness. It's not enough to just have a strong security posture. Your entire organization needs to be security conscious.
You can have Fort Knox level security on your systems, but if someone props the back door open, it doesn't really matter, does it?
Not at all. Everyone in your organization, from the developers writing the code to the executives making the decisions, needs to understand their role in keeping things safe. It's about creating a culture of security.
Speaking of developers, we've talked about a few tools that put security directly into their hands. IAM Identity Center for managing access, and Cognito for controlling user permissions. It seems like AWS is really putting a lot of emphasis on empowering developers to build secure applications from the ground up.
Absolutely. And they're not just giving them the keys to the car and saying, good luck.
Yeah.
They provide tons of resources. Documentation, code examples, best practices, all aimed at helping developers bake security into every step of the development process.
Because, let's be honest, it's much easier to build a secure house from the ground up than to try and retrofit it with security features later. So what are some of the tools that AWS provides to help developers build those secure applications from day one?
Well, there's Amazon Code Guru, which is like having a super-powered code reviewer who can spot security flaws that a human might miss. Then there's AWS Security Hub, which we've talked about before, that gives you a centralized view of your security posture across all your AWS accounts. It's like having a security dashboard for your entire cloud.
So whether you're a developer, a security professional, or just someone who cares about keeping their data safe, AWS has you covered. They've really thought of everything.
They really have. But it's not just about throwing technology at the problem. It's also about understanding the human element.
Right, because at the end of the day, even the most secure systems can be vulnerable to things like social engineering or good old-fashioned human error.
Exactly. That's why security awareness training for everyone in the organization is so crucial. But it's not just about avoiding phishing scams and creating strong passwords. It's about fostering a security-first mindset where everyone feels empowered to speak up if they see something that seems off.
Because sometimes the best security tool is a coworker who's willing to say, hey, did you really mean to click on that link? Or are you sure you want to share that file with everyone? It's about looking out for each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great about the way AWS approaches security. It's a collaborative effort. They provide the tools and the guidance, but they also recognize that their customers play a vital role in maintaining a secure environment.
So it's a partnership. And speaking of partnerships, one of your sources mentioned a new feature in Security Hub that seems particularly helpful for managing security across those multi-account environments we talked about earlier, the consolidated controls view and consolidated control findings.
Those are great new additions. As organizations grow and their AWS footprint expands, managing security across multiple accounts can quickly become a logistical nightmare. These features are designed to bring order to the chaos.
So it's like having a single pane of glass to see and manage all your security controls, no matter how many accounts you're juggling. That sounds like a lifesaver.
Exactly. The consolidated controls view is like that master checklist, making sure your security settings are consistent and compliant across all accounts. No more jumping between consoles or trying to remember which account has which settings enabled.
Music to a security professional's ears. But what about all those security alerts? Managing those across multiple accounts can be completely overwhelming.
That's where the consolidated control findings comes in. It helps to reduce alert fatigue by grouping related findings together, making it easier to focus on the underlying issues instead of getting bogged down in a sea of individual alerts.
So instead of seeing 1,000 tiny brush fires, you see the bigger picture, which helps you prioritize your efforts and allocate your resources more effectively.
Precisely. It's like having a security command center that filters out the noise and highlights the most critical threats so you can focus on what matters most.
I have to say, this deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening. We've covered so much ground, from the basics of firewalls and encryption to these incredibly advanced features that sound like they came straight out of a science fiction movie.
It's amazing to see how much AWS prioritizes security and how they're constantly innovating to stay ahead of the curve.
They really are setting the bar high. But as we've discussed, security is not a set it and forget it kind of thing. It's an ongoing process that requires constant vigilance, adaptation, and a willingness to learn and evolve your practices.
Couldn't agree more. It's like that old saying, the only constant is change. And that's certainly true in the world of cybersecurity.
Speaking of change, one of your sources mentioned a new feature in Amazon CloudFront, their content delivery network, CDN. I always thought of CDNs as a way to make websites load faster, but it turns out they play a crucial role in security, too.
Absolutely. And this new feature sounds like it's going to make a big difference for anyone using CloudFront.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is it?
It's a unified security dashboard for CloudFront, designed to be your one-stop shop for monitoring and managing the security of your content delivery.
You're right. Security is paramount when you have servers spread across the globe. So how does CloudFront address that?
One of your sources highlighted CloudFront's new unified security dashboard. It's designed to be a central hub for monitoring and managing the security of your CloudFront distributions. Think of it like a security command center, but specifically for your content delivery network.
So instead of jumping between different tools and consoles, you can get a holistic view of your CloudFront security from one place. What kind of insights does this dashboard provide?
It offers a wealth of information. You can see traffic patterns, analyze attack types that CloudFront is deflecting, even monitor bot activity targeting your content. And it integrates with AWS OUF, so you can easily create and manage those granular web application firewall rules we talked about, all from the same dashboard.
That's convenient. Having all those tools in one place simplifies security management, especially for those who might be managing larger and more complex CloudFront deployments.
Precisely. And this theme of simplification and centralization is evident in many of the AWS security services. Remember when we talked about Security Lake, that central data repository for all your security and logging data?
Right. Security Lake, it was like gathering all the pieces of a giant security puzzle into one box. But to solve the puzzle, you need a way to make sense of those pieces.
Exactly. And one of your sources dug into how Security Lake does just that. It normalizes all that ingested data using the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, or OCSF.
Okay, I have to be honest, that sounds a bit intimidating. What is OCSF and why is it so significant?
It sounds more complex than it is. Imagine you have a team of detectives, each speaking a different language. OCSF acts like a universal translator, allowing everyone to understand and share information seamlessly.
So instead of each security tool speaking its own language, Security Lake translates everything into a common format. That makes analysis much more efficient.
Precisely. And it's not just about standardization. Security Lake also leverages the Apache Parquet format, which compresses the data, making it much more efficient to store and query. We're talking about handling massive amounts of data without breaking a sweat.
That's impressive. It's like having a library that can store an almost infinite number of books, but still allows you to find the exact information you need in seconds.
Exactly. And just like a good library, Security Lake integrates seamlessly with other AWS services, like Amazon Athena, which lets you query data using standard SQL, and Amazon SageMaker for advanced machine learning analysis. You're not just collecting data, you're turning it into actionable insights.
And those insights can help you make informed decisions about your security posture, identify areas for improvement, and respond more effectively to incidents.
Precisely. One of your sources highlighted the importance of incident response planning. No matter how strong your security is, it's essential to have a plan in place for when, not if, something happens.
That's a sobering thought, but you're right. Having a plan helps you respond quickly and effectively, minimizing the damage and reducing downtime. It's like having a fire drill. You hope you never have to use it, but you'll be glad you practiced if a fire does break out.
Exactly. And just like a fire drill, your incident response plan should be tested and updated regularly. You need to know that everyone involved knows their roles and responsibilities and that the tools and processes you have in place are effective.
This deep dive has really underscored the importance of having a multi-layered approach to security. We've talked about securing your infrastructure, your applications, your data, and even your AI workloads. But it's not enough to just focus on the technical aspects. People, processes, and culture play a vital role as well.
Absolutely. One of your sources emphasized the importance of security training and awareness programs. It's not enough to have a strong security posture. Your entire organization needs to be security conscious.
It's like having the best home security system available, but if you leave the front door wide open, it doesn't matter how sophisticated your alarm system is.
Exactly. Everyone within your organization should understand their role in maintaining security, from developers and IT administrators to executives and end users.
Speaking of developers, We've talked about several AWS services that give developers more control over security. IAM Identity Center helps enforce the principle of least privilege, and Amazon Cognito's access token customization gives them granular control over user permissions. It seems like AWS is putting security in the hands of those who are building and deploying applications.
Absolutely. And it's not just about giving them the tools, it's also about empowering them with knowledge and best practices.
Yeah.
AWS provides a wealth of resources for developers, including documentation, code samples, and reference architectures to help them build secure applications from the ground up.
That's so important. Security should be baked into the development process, not treated as an afterthought.
Precisely. And that's where services like Amazon Code Guru, which can analyze your code for security vulnerabilities, and AWS Security Hub, which can provide a centralized view of your security posture across your entire AWS environment, become invaluable.
It sounds like AWS is continually striving to make security more accessible, understandable, and manageable for everyone, from developers and IT administrators to security professionals and business leaders.
Absolutely. And they're constantly innovating, exploring new technologies, and finding ways to leverage those technologies to enhance security. One of your sources discussed AWS's use of Nitro Enclaves to protect sensitive data and code, particularly for AI workloads.
Right, Nitro Enclaves. They sound like something out of a science fiction movie. Can you explain what they are and why they're so important for security?
Imagine having a secret room within your house that's completely isolated from the outside world. That's essentially what a Nitro Enclave is, a secure, isolated computing environment that's separate from your main operating system and applications.
So even if someone were to compromise your main system, they wouldn't be able to access the data or code inside a Nitro Enclave.
Exactly. It's like having a digital vault within your cloud environment. Now, one of your sources mentioned that AWS is planning to integrate Nitro Enclaves with KMS, our trusty key management service.
Ah, that makes sense. So you could use KMS to encrypt your data before it even enters a Nitro Enclave, adding an extra layer of protection for your most sensitive information.
Precisely. And because Nitro Enclaves are integrated with the AWS Nitro system, a hardware-based virtualization technology, they offer unparalleled security and performance. It's like having a bank vault guarded by a team of highly trained security professionals, all dedicated to protecting your most valuable assets.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. We've explored the multifaceted world of AWS security, from the foundational concepts of firewalls and encryption to the cutting-edge technologies like generative AI and Nitro Enclaves. It's clear that AWS is committed to providing a secure and compliant environment for their customers.
They are, and they're constantly innovating, adding new features, and improving existing services to stay ahead of the evolving threat landscape.
But security is not just about technology. It's about people, processes, and a culture of security awareness.
Well said. Security is a shared responsibility, and it requires a collaborative effort between AWS and their customers.
It's been a pleasure diving into the world of AWS security with you. We've covered so much ground, and I hope our deep divers feel equipped to navigate this complex and ever-evolving landscape.
Likewise. Remember, staying informed, implementing best practices, and leveraging the vast array of tools and resources that AWS provides are key to building a secure and resilient presence in the cloud.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into AWS security. If this episode has sparked even more questions, we're just a click away on social media. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay secure.